Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. It's time to talk technology.
Welcome to the Tech Talk unboxing of the iPhone 13 Pro. The first thing you'll notice, as with all the 13 range, is they've removed the plastic from the packaging. This is part of the environmental message from Apple. And I must admit, I do like getting shiny new things and taking off the plastic, but I also get where we're coming from, and well done to Apple for reducing the amount of plastic that we're using. Instead of the plastic, I still might get my satisfaction from a new device opening by the little pull tabs we've got on there. So let's pull those open and see if I get the same sound and the same feel as it used to be with the old ripping off the plastic. Here goes. I'll just stay quiet while we see if we can hear something. Not quite as satisfying as I would have liked, but anyway, again, I understand where the environmental message is coming from. You'll also notice on the back of the phone, nothing's changed here. The numbers are still small, and I'd like to say they're getting smaller each year, but I think my eyes are just getting a little bit older each year, surprisingly enough. So it is hard to read the numbers on the back of an iPhone. Looking for the IMEI, for example, is difficult, especially on the Pro range, which has a black box with white numbers on the back. It seems to make it just a little bit harder. But anyway, that's me being a little bit picky in terms of the packaging. Let's get into the phone. The first thing you notice there obviously is the camera looks substantial. It looks bigger, there's no doubt about it. And we'll pull the phone out. Now again, they've stuck with the white protective vinyl, the same as they did with the 12. I used to like the old days when they had clear plastic on there, so you could start to use the phone through the clear plastic and not get your fingerprints all over. But now, I've got to pull it off. Oh, look at that beautiful new screen, which is going to be dirty with my fingerprints in a minute. So let's just turn that on. And while that's turning on, I'll just have a look in the box. So in the box, you'll see the same as the 12 Pro. It's got the USB-C to Lightning cable. You'll also notice that there's no charging brick in the box. Again, this is part of the environmental message they started last year. The logic is that everyone's already got a charging brick. You don't need to keep providing charging bricks, which end up in the bottom of a drawer or thrown out or wherever they may be. The problem was that the cable they supply is USB-C, not USB-A. Most people have a charging brick that's USB-A, but eventually people will get to that USB-C. Interesting, it is still Lightning on the phone. You've also got the sleeve here, which has got your SIM pin, and it's got the Apple sticker, which most people don't even know is in there. And from an environmental perspective, maybe Apple could stop printing those stickers and putting them in there, because I'm sure they stay in there forevermore. That's the packaging as such. Let's get into the phone and have a look at the phone. So the first thing I want to do is I'll just put that there, and we'll grab something I prepared earlier. So that's the 12 Pro versus the 13 Pro. Now, the first thing that sticks out is the notch size. They did talk a lot about the notch being reduced by 20%, and there's no doubt about it. You can see straight away there the notch has reduced. What they're going to do with the notch, or the extra real estate provided by the smaller notch, I don't know. At this stage, maybe they could put battery percentage up in the top, maybe they could give you extra information, but at this stage it doesn't look like they're doing anything else except saying, here's an extra bit of screen real estate. Maybe it's the next step towards getting rid of the notch altogether, I don't know, but at the moment you can see the notch has reduced in size. In terms of the weight, yeah, I can feel it's about 17 grams difference. Actually, I can't feel that at all. I'd be pretty impressed with myself if I could pick 17 grams difference in weight. The Apple specs tell me that 13 Pro is 17 grams heavier than the 12 Pro. So you can see they are identical in size. The height and the width are identical, but the thickness, you can see here, if I turn them both on their side, you can see the thickness, whoops, if I can get it to balance there, you can see the thickness is 0.25 millimeters difference. The 13 Pro is 0.25 millimeter thicker. Now, I actually can't see that, to be honest. I'd be pretty impressed if you could just notice that 0.25 millimeters. What I am interested in is where the button placement is. So let's just have a look there and see if they've moved the buttons at all. We'll line the two of them up perfectly side by side, and you can see there, if I can get them to balance again, just a note here, balancing an iPhone on its side is not something that happens easily. So how about I just hold them still? So you can see there, the buttons have moved ever so slightly from one to the next. I don't know why Apple were compelled to change the button size. Surely it wasn't to sell more cases because the camera bump has changed anyway. So that's the left-hand side as you're looking at the phone. If I flick it over, let's look at the right-hand side. And again, you can see, they don't like balancing, do they? Again, you can see there, hold them still. Again, you can see there, the button, the power button, has moved ever so slightly down on the iPhone 13 Pro. I don't know why they've done that. Physically, the two phones, the 12 Pro and the 13 Pro, look the same. That marginal difference in width, the change of the buttons for whatever reason, the location of the buttons, but generally you look at the two phones and they look like they're pretty much the same size. The weight difference again, I don't think you'll notice there. The brightness of the screen has increased by 25% on the 13 Pro. The big news is about the screen refresh rate. There was a lot of discussion in rumours before the launch about a 120Hz refresh rate screen. That was something that was almost needed by Apple to come out with that better screen just to make sure they were keeping up to date with competitors. So Apple have gone one better. Rather than having a standard 120Hz refresh rate, they've done as only Apple can do, and they've taken a word we use every day, promotion, and we now have a ProMotion screen. It's the word promotion with a capital P and a capital M, and now it's a trendy Apple word to use. It's an adaptive refresh rate screen. When it doesn't need a high refresh rate, it drops the refresh rate back to 10 Hz, all the way back to 10 Hz. If it needs a faster refresh rate, it will move up all the way up to 120 Hz when it's needed. Presumably the idea here is to extend the battery life when you don't need that high refresh rate rather than refreshing the screen when you don't need to refresh it. Again, you won't notice it there on the imagery, but once you got in and started using it for moving around, for games, that type of thing, you'd notice that better refresh rate on there. So it's called ProMotion. ProMotion, capital P, capital M. Let's look at the camera arrangement now. So sure, you've got 3 cameras on the back of the 12 Pro, but you can see straight away on the back of the 13 Pro that the cameras are substantially larger. The layout is essentially the same, but they're definitely larger. The cameras in the phone are all 12 megapixels still, but the wide and the ultra wide on the 13 Pro have got larger apertures, and the telephoto lens has gone to a smaller aperture. The optical zoom on the 12 Pro is 2 times, the optical zoom on the 13 Pro is 3 times, and that's a good increase. The sensors have been upgraded to allow more light, and you can just see physically they're much larger compared to the size on the 12 Pro. That's really important because smartphone cameras typically are pretty good at taking photos in good light or outdoors, they're fantastic. But when you get to maybe indoors or low light situations, the cameras aren't so good. More light that you can get coming into those cameras is going to improve that low light or even the night photography. Certainly in here you can see the bigger cameras there is going to allow more light in, and that's going to improve that photography. The ultra wide camera has also got macro photography now. And macro photography is something that people probably weren't desperately screaming out for, but to make sure Apple either stays in touch with the competition or stays in front of the competition, I think macro is a good feature. So the ultra-wide lens is what's used automatically as you go close to an object. The other interesting one is the stabilization. People weren't necessarily aware of it in the past, but the 12 Pro and the 12 Pro Max had a slightly different method of stabilization. The 12 Pro had dual optical image stabilization, and the 12 Pro Max had sensor shift optical image stabilization, a slightly better version of stabilization on photos. The 13 Pro now gets the same as the 12 Pro Max had, the sensor shift optical image stabilization. All of the phones in the range receive the feature called photographic styles. Now this is a way, in my opinion, to make sure that the iPhone can compete with other cameras or other phone manufacturers who might have a different style of photography. It is very much a personal opinion. The style you might prefer might be high contrast, or it might be warmer, or you might have something that you like to do maybe with filters after you take a photo. With photographic styles, you can change the filter style before you take the photo, although it's not a filter, is what Apple says, but you can change the style of the photo before you take the photo, and effectively it's a destructive process, so you can't then undo that after you've taken the photo. I think this is really just a way for them to make sure that they can address any competition with the style of photography that that particular smartphone has. The other thing that you get with all of the phones is cinematic mode. Now, often good technology often gives you something that you didn't know that you needed. Now, I didn't know I needed cinematic mode, but now that I've looked at it, read about it, watched some demonstrations of it, gee, I'm glad I've got cinematic mode on my new phone. It's something that gives you a similar effect to portrait mode or bokeh mode with still photography, where you can have one part of the image in focus and other parts slightly out of focus to make one part stand out, but it will also do that on the fly. And the demonstration at the launch showed a video of someone at the front of the picture with parts of the background slightly out of focus, and then as the camera moved, and in fact as the actor moved their focus across to someone else, that person was in focus and other parts, including the foreground, were slightly out of focus. So it just allows the focus to move from one part to another. Cinematographers call this rack focus. Don't worry, I've never heard of rack focus either. I'm not a cinematographer, but now that I know about it, wow, I'm glad I'm going to be able to use rack focus. Cinematic mode must use a fair bit of processing power because you can only do cinematic mode 1080p at up to 30 frames per second. Obviously, with Dolby Vision on the 13 Pro, you've got up to 60 frames per second at 4K, so the phone and the cameras and the processing are capable of that on Dolby Vision. Cinematic mode, again, must use a bit more processing power. I'm not sure how much memory cinematic mode uses. I'm not sure if it's hungrier on memory than, say, 1080p normal or 4K. I haven't had a chance to experiment with that, so I don't know just exactly how much memory that uses at this stage. The other change on the 13 Pro from the 12 Pro is ProRes. It's a video format that some people using Apple products are already familiar with. It's a higher level, higher quality video format, a bit like the ProRAW is to still photography. So ProRes is now available on the 13 Pro. You've got that at 4K, up to 30 frames per second, except, a little trap for young players here, except if you buy the 128 gig variant of the iPhone 13 Pro, you can't do 4K with ProRes. You can only do 1080p. The logic there, I assume, is that it must use up so much memory that the 128 gig would be a waste of time trying to use ProRes at 4K on. So if you're buying that phone and you're a bit disappointed when you find that feature there, just be aware of that particular one. You've also got Dolby Vision, 60 frames per second on the front camera. You've got cinematic mode, ProRes all on the front camera. So front cameras now on phones are getting to the stage where they're pretty impressive. Battery life, good increase in the battery life. Video playback was rated at 17 hours on the iPhone 12 Pro. Now that's been increased to 22 hours. Ignore the exact number of hours, just look at the difference there. It's a fair difference in the actual number of hours of video playback, rated hours. And then memory sizes, you've still got 128 gig, 256 gig and 512 gig, the same as the 12 Pro, but there's an addition now where you have 1 terabyte. It's an incredible amount of memory on a phone. There are people still using notebooks out there with dramatically less than 1 terabyte of hard drive storage. So to have 1 terabyte of space or memory on an iPhone just seems incredible. In terms of colors, you've got silver, you've got graphite, you've got gold, which is that one there that we've been looking at, and you've got Sierra blue. Still 4 colors. Obviously, slight change in there. The Sierra blue replaces the green that used to be in the 12 Pro. So in summary, upgrades from the 12 Pro include a higher refresh rate on the screen, a smaller notch, a better camera or a better group of cameras definitely, increase in zoom from 2 times to 3 times, ProRes video format that I mentioned a moment ago, photographic styles have been added in there, cinematic mode's been added in. So although many people said this wasn't really a revolutionary phone, there was no one single compelling feature that would make you rush out and buy the 13 Pro as opposed to the 12 Pro, when you look at all those features, when you add up all those features, there's actually a fair bit in this upgrade. The other big question, I suppose, really is what would be the compelling things that would make you upgrade from a 13 to a 13 Pro? Now they're both the same size. Physically they're identical, same length, same width, same thickness, same 6.1 inch screen on both of them. So what are the things that would push you to go from a 13 to a 13 Pro? So in my opinion, in order, roughly in order, the things that I would go from the 13 to the 13 Pro would be the better cameras, no doubt about that, they are better cameras on the 13 Pro. The 3 times zoom camera, so it's got the third camera. Some people don't get that excited by the zoom camera, but I think that optical zoom is really nice to have. So the 3 times zoom camera, I think people sometimes will buy it for that. The better screen refresh rate. Now, I haven't had a good look at the screen refresh rate yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to make it look a bit more impressive with certain things that you're doing. For answering an email, probably not so much. Watching a video, playing a game, definitely. The macro camera, nice addition as well. The better battery life, that's certainly something that I think many people love, the longer battery life. So the better battery life from the Pro might be enough to get them over the line. For serious photographers, the ProRes and the ProRAW in the Pro phones over the 13 standard certainly would be features that would push you towards the Pro phone. And oh, don't forget the 5th core on the GPU. The 13 and the 13 Pro have both got the new A15 Bionic processor. The 13 has got a 4-core GPU, whereas the Pro has got a 5-core GPU. So I can just see stores across the world being rushed with people saying, I need that extra core, I need that 5th core on my GPU. Actually, I don't think that'll happen, but you tell me, I might be completely wrong. You tell me if the 5th core on the GPU is the compelling feature that makes you go from the 13 standard to the 13 Pro. This has been Matthew Dickerson unboxing the iPhone 13 Pro.